Hello weirdos. Welcome back to my channel. My name is EmmaAbe and I'm exhausted. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm just very flushed. It's very hot outside and I was wearing sweatpants and I don't even know what the temperature is. I think it's like 60 something degrees and it was too warm for sweatpants. Oh my gosh. So today I also got a haircut, which is nice because parent-teacher conferences are coming up probably by the time you see this video. So I was kind of like, oh, I gotta get this done so that I don't have to worry about like filming it or anything while I'm focusing on parent-teacher conferences. So the video that I'm doing today that we're going to talk about is all the books that I read in the month of September. I know it's kind of late, but my goodness, BookTube prize stuff was going down, and this is the first time that I've had to like really sit and think and talk about what I read in September. So September was kind of like a lowish book reading month for me, but you know what, I am trying to give myself patience and to give myself grace because I started a new job, and also some of you guys might be thinking like, oh, 10 books, like that's still a lot of books. For me it's low, but that's just me and how I feel. 10 books is like the minimum that I like to hit every month, and I was getting all depressed because I thought I'd hit 10 books because I read 3 library books and 7 books. Yeah, and during the month I only thought I'd read 2 library books, so I was very surprised to see that I hit the 10th. I have coffee, even though it's not the morning, because it's just a routine that I like to do. So let's just talk about the books. So the first book that I read is Under a White Sky. This is by Elizabeth Colbert. This I read for the BookTube prize, and I don't want to rehash my feelings towards it. I'll point you to my BookTube prize video. I did read that in the finals, so you can go to my finals video where we talk about it. So yeah, but since it's after the prize, I will tell you that I ranked this one, I think 6th, if I'm remembering. The next one that I read is another BookTube prize book, and that is Facing the Mountain by David James Brown. I'm also not going to rehash my feelings on because, again, I talked about it before, but that one I did rank 2nd. And those are the only 2 books that I had to read for this round because all the other books that I had already read before. So now going on to like some of the books that I actually did read. So the next book that I read was In the Time of the Butterflies. This is by Julia Alvarez, and this is a book that I read because some of my students have to read it for, I think, an English class. I don't remember off the top of my head. It tells the story of 4 sisters that were all very involved in the revolution in the Dominican Republic in the 60s, and 3 of the 4 of them were actually murdered and driven off a cliff. And in this, we follow all of their different perspectives from the point of when they were really young to right up to the point of their death. I thought we were gonna get an insight more into like the political movings around. It was a lot more of their personal feelings rather than the strategic things, if that makes any sense. I did enjoy it. I thought it was really, really well done. I feel like it took me very long to put together what this is called In the Time of the Butterflies, and their code name was Mariposa, which means butterfly. And so it just, to make that connection took me a second, and I was a little bit embarrassed. I was talking to some of my coworkers, and my coworkers were like, some of the students don't get it, so don't beat yourself up about it. And I was like, fair. And yeah, I mean, I just thought it was a solid book, you know. I feel like, you know, I'll recommend it to people. It's good. I don't really know what to say. This probably would not have been a book that I would not have picked up otherwise, because historical fiction, not always my favorite cup of tea. It just depends. But I thought this was really, really well done. The next book that I read is I, Robot. This is by Isaac Asimov, and I really, really enjoyed this. This is probably one of my favorites that I read. So basically it's a series of short stories that are all kind of like linked together because it's like this reporter that's talking to this one scientist who was heavily involved in like robotics and the development of these robots. So saw a bunch of like the robots develop, and so that's the framing device for the entire thing. But basically it's a series of short stories about shit that these robots get up to, and they're governed by 3 laws. The first law is a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human to come to harm. The second law is a robot must obey orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. So you can't obey an order for a human to kill another human. Third law is a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. So a robot can't be ordered to kill itself, if that makes any sense. And I thought that this was just hilarious. I loved it. I thought it was really, really funny. I think one of my favorite things about this is that, and it's something I think that Isaac Asimov was writing at a time where you were seeing a lot of this thing, and that is like the thing being a lot of sci-fi writers were writing about robot like revolutions and robots murdering a bunch of people, and Isaac Asimov kind of like wanted to turn it on its head and give it like here's an alternative. What would it actually look like for these things to happen, and where, you know, you don't have robots that want to like murder humans. But it does kind of get later into the book, like starts ruminating on kind of things more on like in line with AI and the consequences of those actions, what that would mean. Except it doesn't specifically say AI, because I don't think I'm remembering my computer science history well enough. That really wasn't something that was ruminating at this time. But I felt like that last bit of chapter is something that's very relevant to today, and talking about what are the implications of having things very, very sophisticated, like algorithms or robots that know you so well that it can make all of your decisions for you before you even make them. I thought it was really funny. I really like some of the stories where there was just ridiculous things happening. So there's like this one story where a robot was told to go get this material, and the robot was just going around in circles and around the material, and the humans were like, what the heck, why isn't it going around in a circle? And basically what was happening was it was being push and pulled between like the third law and the second law. So it was told to go get this material, but where the material was in a very like dangerous like area. It's where the robot would get hurt if it, you know, didn't go get it. And anyway, it was just, I thought it was very funny because they kept saying like the robot was acting crazy when the robot was just trying to preserve their own life. Anyway, I really, really enjoyed iRobot, and I can't wait to read some more of Isaac Asimov's other work. The next book that I read is The Code Breaker. I have it here. I don't know where my cover went. I bet you I left it at my parents' home. I don't know. But this is by Walter Isaacson, so I'll just pop a picture up of it here. And this kind of talks, well, it's all about CRISPR. It's all about the development of CRISPR and technologies like CRISPR and gene editing. I find this to be a very, very fascinating field of study. I really like stuff that deals with like genes and genetics. I find that to be particularly interesting. CRISPR is like a technology that I think holds a lot of considerations and ethical considerations that make me uncomfortable, because it feels very eugenicsy, and eugenics is something that I hate personally, particularly because if we were living in a world where eugenics was a thing and lofted as being perfect and what we should strive to, I would not be born, or I would be forcefully sterilized. And that makes me feel really uncomfortable, because I think I am a human being that deserves life. And who gets to make the decisions about what babies deserve to be born and or who gets to reproduce, I think is a very disgusting choice, like decision for us to be mandating as a society. Yeah. Like who has those rights to make those decisions? Anyway, so that's like why kind of CRISPR is very, very, like, why I'm so interested in this topic. And like this book, like any good CRISPR book should do, talks about that and has like wrestles with that decision and doesn't try and force feed you an answer. It just kind of like leads you along that decision and lets you kind of wrestle with that answer and that question yourself. And it doesn't just focus on that book, or that conversation. It talks a lot about I think it does a really good job of setting up the knowledge base that you need for like CRISPR. To understand the technology, you kind of understand how genes work, how DNA works, and so it takes a step back to go all the way back to the beginning. And I think one of the first chapters are actually talking about the finding of the double helix structure. And one thing that I think this book does really, really well is talk about how collaboration is key in science. And so that's, I think, another like overarching theme of this book. Maybe even, like, to a degree, if not even bigger degree than just the CRISPR stuff, because we often like to think of science as, you know, one person slaving over this topic and like really, really like learning about it and figuring it out and making the breakthrough discovery, and it's their sole discovery. Where this book really talks about how collaborative a lot of this work is, and how, you know, when we think about certain discoveries or certain things being made, it's often not just that one person or even that one person's lab. It's the collaboration of a bunch of different work talking together, and how we as a global society who want to build scientists are better off having that collaboration and encouraging that collaboration rather than trying to get bogged down by a lot of the red tape that prevents that collaboration, while also, you know, still acknowledging and contributions people make and getting rid of or trying its best to prevent plagiarism and stuff like that. So it's another interesting question that this book is tackling and basically trying to answer. And I think this one gives more of an answer of just collaboration is really important, because it continues to, there's a whole section of the book where it talks about the advent of the vaccine and tests for COVID. And that I found really, really interesting and stuff that I was not expecting to be talked about in this book. And because a lot of the scientists that were developing CRISPR and working on CRISPR were also working on the vaccine and trying to develop it. And anyway, I thought it was a really like fascinating and interesting book. It was maybe a little bit too long for my taste, or maybe it's just that it took me a while to get through it because I started it back in August before I got injured, and I like finished it like halfway through September. So I like, at least me personally, maybe I feel like I've taken so long to get through this. Maybe that's kind of coloring my feeling towards it, but otherwise, like, pretty solid nonfiction book. I would recommend it. The next book that I read is Zachary, Ying, and the Dragon Emperor. This is by Xiranjie Zhao. I really like this. I've read Iron Widow, which is another book by the same author. I really like their writing style and how they are able to merge a lot of their interest into their book, which a lot of their interest involves like history, in particular like Chinese history, but also with like technology and games and like modern sci-fi things. And I think that blend just works really, really well. So in this book, you're following this is a middle grade book. In this book, you're following this young boy named Zachary Ying. He is I'm trying to remember if he's a Chinese-born American or if he migrated to America. But he is ethnically Chinese. And not only that, he's also a minority. So he is Muslim. I do not remember the name of the minority. Anyway, he is a ethnic minority. And I think I really enjoyed that representation, because I feel like that is not often talked about in books when we're talking about China and we're having a conversation about what it means to be a Chinese American. It often just kind of assumes that the people are all Chinese people are the same, or they're Han, and there are so many more people in China that are not Han, and their stories are often lumped together or not told. And And so I really liked that. I thought that was really, really interesting and was really fun to read about and learn about. He has like this game that he plays with his friends, and it's got like this headset, like this VR headset. You can kind of see it on the cover a little bit. Yeah. And his headset is like, and it's like a greatest heroes, or not heroes, but like important figures throughout history. You have people like Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, like those kind of people are all featured in this game, including the Dragon Emperor, who was the emperor who created the Qin dynasty, who united and ended the Warring States period. And so his headset has that person in it, and I am going to hit myself because I do not remember who it is. And they're trying to basically save China from these other people who are trying to destroy like Chinese mythology, essentially. It's a lot more complicated than that, but for the purposes of this video, we're just going to leave it at that. So he meets up with some other kids who are his age, who are also have these devices so they're also connected to the real figures from history as well. And you learn about lots of different people in this. I don't know. I thought it was really, really fun. I would recommend it. It was a fun book. So there you go. The next book that I read is The Last Thing He Told Me. This is by Laura Dear? I can't read my handwriting. It could be either. And this is actually my 120th book that I read this year. So this year I finally finished my reading my goal. I hit my goal. Yay. A couple months early, which is usually the plan. So yay. All books that I read from this point onward were just kind of bonus ones. So Last Thing He Told Me is like a mystery book. I read this for the Goodreads Choice Awards because it won, I think, the mystery. And this one, like, so you're following this woman who, her husband disappears and leaves her with her stepdaughter, and she is only left with a note that says protect her, and she knows nothing else. And so she's going on a journey to kind of figure out what the heck happened to her husband. I kind of want to leave it at that, because I think kind of like the less you know, the better. Yeah. My feelings about it were, I thought it was engaging and interesting. Like, my one, like, nitpick or something that I wish could have been done better is I wish that the knowledge was just a little bit unfolded a little bit more as to who exactly her husband was and her husband's connection to things, because I felt like we were slowly learning it and slowly unfurling it, and then we got to this one chapter and it basically was an info dump of exactly what happened, and I was just like, oh, I wish we could have gotten that like drawn out a little bit more. And it kind of felt like the author was, oh my gosh, I'm already like 70% of this book and I still need to have all of this stuff written too. And kind of the info dump was the quickest way for us to get the information that we needed to know in order to continue the story. But I don't know, I just kind of wish that information was not info dumped on us. But other than that, I thought it was pretty interesting. I liked the growing relationship between basically the mother and daughter. I think that's all I'm going to say about that one, because I don't think you need to know anymore. But read it. I thought it was enjoyable. The next book that I read is The System, Who Rigged It, How We Fix It. This is by Robert B. Reich. I don't know, I mean, this book wasn't like mind-bending to me, I guess. I feel like somebody who hasn't been like having similar conversations to myself and talking about how capitalism is trashed and likes to, you know, squish people and grind people up in a meat grinder, this book would be really revolutionary for them, and like seeing how they thought about like economics and how it works in America. And this just wasn't that for me, because I'd already been having a lot of these conversations. The thing that like was new for me, it was thinking about oligarchy and how that is working in American society. Like, like putting that specific word to it, which oligarchy basically means that there are a handful of people or a handful of power, families who control power, who could basically control how stuff runs. And that power is often seen in American society through money. I just had never thought about it that way. I think it's really well written, a really good book, and would surely like explode some minds. It just did not explode mine. And I read this because some of my students do have to read it if they are taking, like, I think economic inequality, which, I mean, maybe at that age that would have been more mind-boggling for me to read if I was like a senior or a junior and I read this, but just kind of where I am post-college, it just wasn't. Still a good book. I'm still going to point people to it. I encourage you guys to read it if you are at all curious, but that's just not how I don't know if that's very presumptuous of me to like say, but I'm very much on the train of, I think billionaires are an unethical thing to have exist in the world. That's just me. Moving on to the next book, and that is the Last Cubanista. This is by Donna Barahuyera. Oh my god, this book, like, I cried, and I teared up in a couple of parts, and I was just like, oh my god, this was so good. I purchased this on a whim, and I am so glad I did. So this is about a young girl and her family. The world is melting. The entire planet is melting, and so they were chosen amongst a few hundred people to be put on an evacuation ship, and leave. And she is the only one who wakes up and is able to remember how stuff used to be on Earth. Yeah. That's what got me to read it. It's a lot more than that. I really liked how it was done. The explanation as to why people don't remember. I thought that was very, very interesting. I really liked it. The whole thing with her brother at the end, that's what got me. That's what got me, is the relationship between her and her brother. And I just thought, this I think is also for middle grade. I don't know. But if it's not middle grade, it's like YA of some sort. But I really just loved how it emphasized the importance of storytelling, and the importance of storytelling to us as humans, to our species. And I felt like this also was like a love letter to like amazing storytellers, because they will name drop people in this book that, like, Octavia the Butler, Neil Gaiman, like people like that, people like Ursula K. Le Guin, Toni Morrison, like people like that who've made really, really good works of stories, who made really compelling stories. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it. I really like the art with just the naked cover. Like, look at that. So beautiful. Like, this was like a 5-star. Like, it made me cry. Like, it was that good. Like, that doesn't happen too often. Oh my god. So good. Anyway. Oh my god, my foot is asleep. And the very last book that I read is A Wizard of Earthsea. This is by Ursula K. Le Guin. And this is the only book that I've read of her, and it's actually mentioned in this book. Which I was like, oh my gosh, I'm reading that book right now. So this is a world where magic exists. It's like a fantasy, and you're following Ged, who is this like young sorcerer and you're following him as he is learning to use magic. And magic in this world is controlled by, like, you have to know like the true name of whatever you're using in order to manipulate it and force it to its will. And that's like happens very, very quickly. And I think one thing I liked about this book is that he isn't like 16. He like works really, really hard to learn the stuff he learns, and then he is haunted by like this thing that he calls like his shadow that brings harm to him and people around him, and he's, for a good portion of the book, running away from the shadow, and then is forced to confront the shadow. Yeah, I'm going to be reading more of the Earthsea books, and the next one is The Tombs of Atuan, looking at the back. And yeah, I can't wait to get started on that one. But My overall feelings about this, I kind of was just, I felt a little bit meh about it, if I'm honest. I kind of want to keep going and keep seeing. I think this suffered similarly to what the Codebreaker suffered from, is that I felt like it took me so long to read this book because I started it before I injured myself. I feel like that's coloring a little bit of my perception, but I just, in general, think the plot of the second book is going to be more interesting to me than this one. So we're going to go read the second book, see how I feel, and then keep going from there. But in terms of the writing, I think it was very good writing. Those are the books that I read. I want to take a nap now. I don't know if I can. I will try. And probably do some laundry. I don't want to do laundry, but I have to do laundry. All right. I will see you guys next week. Bye.